Hey, welcome back to the channel, guys. So in this video, I'm going to do a live demo. I'm actually going to solder a brass floor flange onto a lead stub out. Now, in the past, I did a couple of videos where I took still photos, I strung them together, and I show you what I do in the field if I have a situation where the bowl is rocking or the lead bend or the lead stub out is a little rotted. But I have a lot of people asking me, could we see you do that live? And what I'm going to do is I have a demonstration board set up here, and I'm actually going to live in studio solder the floor flange onto the lead stub out. So I'm going to link up in the cards over here the two videos I did in the past about what I've done in certain situations when I run across a problem like that. Listen, this is the way I was taught in the late 60s, early 70s. It's not the only way to do it. A lot of guys consider this overkill. I see many different versions out there on YouTube of guys soldering the lead to the floor flange. This is the way I do it. And I also want to mention, I don't think this is for a homeowner or a DIYer to do. I'm just showing you what I do as a professional plumber. But if you feel confident enough, go for it. All right, quickly, we'll go over some of the tools I use to make this happen. Now, way back a long time ago, propane was the thing, but when MAP gas came out, I converted to MAP gas. It burns hotter. It makes things go faster. I have two tips, and depending upon the mood I'm in and the level of skill I feel like I'm in, this is my Turbo Torch ST3 tip, which makes things nice and toasty real fast, but there's a fine line between melting the lead and melting the solder, so you have to be careful. In this demonstration today, I'm just going to use my Turbo Torch ST1 tip, which, leaves you a little more insurance for not burning through the lead. I have my Scotch-Brite pads. I have my wiping cloth. Now this is a wiping cloth, a modern wiping cloth, nothing like the wiping cloths of days of old, but you just can't find them anymore, so I get what I can get and I use what I can use. And I'll just say that years ago, when we used to get these, we used to unravel them, paint them with what they called plumber's soil, which was basically like a water-based shoe polish, if you will. And we actually used to spit in the container, and with a brush, we would brush the black on. When the black dried, we would then melt wax on here. The wax would act as a barrier when we would wipe a joint so the solder wouldn't stick to the cloth. Because the last thing you want is the solder sticking to the cloth, because it'll just screw up the joint. But anyway, there's my trusty modern day wiping cloth, which is a little thin, but I use what I have to use. I use what's available. Needless to say, I got my striker, get my flame going. I have my candle. My candle is what's going to cool things down. If I feel things are getting too hot, I just put that candle on there. I cool things down because we don't want to get out of control. And then I'm going to use my 60-40 solder, guys. 60-40 solder. Here's a short piece, and I have a full bar. I bought a new bar ready to go for this demonstration. I don't know if you can see that, but it's stamped on there, 40-60 solder. I do not use 50-50 solder because 50-50 solder gets too hard. I can't work it. As soon as I pull the flame away, it gets hard right away. The 60-40 stays a little more pliable, a little more wipeable. And then I have a shave hook. My shave hook here is to shave the lead or clean the lead, and I'll show you that in the next frame coming up. How I use this. Although today, with the advent of multi-tools, I'll show you how I substitute the multi-tool for the shave hook. And finally, my bending pin. Now, this bending pin, this is an old tool. And I guess you can use a ball peen hammer, a small ball peen hammer, but this, I bang the lead into the up against the brass floor flange. So you'll see that when I get to it. I bang this, I'm able to form the lead and bang it up against the inside edge of the flange. and get as tight as I can so that when I'm soldering and I start heating things up, the solder doesn't actually fall into the lead bend. So those are the tools I use. Give me a couple of seconds. I'm going to set up my jig here, and you know, I'll show you the prepping of the flange, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in, and I'm not going to talk over the actual soldering. When I actually go in to do the soldering, I'm just going to work right through it, and then I'll talk after that's all done. So I'll see you in the next frame. Oops, and we cannot forget our soldering paste, our soldering flux. We need this, very important. Okay, now what I'm going to do is the next step is I'm going to get that flange and I'm going to tin it. So tinning a flange is the process of laying a layer of solder on that flange, which is going to ensure a tight bond between the actual solder and the lead when we get into the process. All right, so we obviously have more sticking out of the ground. That usually is the way it is. If I'm putting a new lead bend in, if it's an existing job, I don't have this excess, but what you should do, if you can, but it's not always the case, I'd probably say maybe less than 50% of the jobs I do, I don't screw the flange down to the subfloor because there is no subfloor for whatever reason. But when you can, certainly screw the flange down to the subfloor in as many spots as you can. If you can only catch one, great. If you can catch two, if you can catch three, that's even better. But whatever you can catch to keep the flange down there. So to cut this excess off, back in the good old days, I took my trusty Lennox hacksaw here, and there are like two places you can place the saw. You can put it on here to where the blade faces straight down, or you can put it on the opposite end here where I have it. And when you mount it in this position here, you're able to, the blade sits at a 45-degree angle. So actually what I do is I sit it down on top of the floor flange, and I make sure I have enough off of the top here so that when I'm sawing with the hacksaw and I'm going through the lead bend, the saw will actually travel over the top. So you'll see this part here. As I saw through it, it'll just breeze over the top. If you have too much sticking up, the saw's not going to be able to make it pass. But that's what I generally do. I go nice and steady, and I will go back and forth until I get through the whole thing. But in today's world, you have the luxury of multi-tools. So if you have a multi-tool, with a fine blade here, and I went all the way around the flange using the flange actually as a guide, and I cut that lead off as even as I could get it all around, continually rotating the saw as I went. So I got that excess off, and then I use a rotary tool, a little rotary tool with a little sanding barrel on it, and I'll go all the way around the perimeter or the circumference of the lead bend and clean that up in the field. So then, as you can see here, I put screws down to hold the flange down. You can't always do that, but if you can, that's great. Then what I do is I take my bending pin and I go all the way around and I knock this lead to sit up against the inside edge of the flange. I want that to actually butt up against the flange, because what that's going to do, depending upon your technique and how hot the solder gets, it'll prevent the solder from falling through. Now, truth be told, in the real world, a drop or two passes through. Doesn't make a difference because I'm going to fill up this whole void with solder. It's going to be completely filled with solder with my 60-40 bar solder, and you'll see how that's done coming up. So there you go. I have the flange screwed in again, and this black that you see under there, I actually have a Blue Monster torch guard under there, and the only reason I have that there is because my jig is made out of wood, and I don't want to burn through it because I'm going to get this pretty hot when I put the torch on it. So I have the torch guard. Then I went out and bought this tile, this little sheet of tile, to demonstrate how it would be done really, in a real world job. So with that being said, guys, I got to reposition the camera up top to shine straight down, or to get a shot straight down. And hopefully, while I'm doing this, I won't, get in the way too much. And after it's done, I'll do a close-up of the joint. But let me reposition the camera and we will move forward. So there it is, guys. That's a bulletproof joint. Even if you're not able to get a couple of screws into the flange, this is not going anywhere. As you can see, I got my bolts in here. And for the sake of this video, because this thing is actually still warm, you know, I normally use wax. But there are occasions when I will come in and use my SaniSeal gasket. Depends on job situation. And you can get that, put that over the bolts. And I guarantee you that that is a leak-proof joint. Once the bowl is set, you're going to be in business. So, guys, that's how I do it. There are a lot of different techniques out there. You'll see guys basically flaring the lead over, just peening it over, and then they'll get some spool solder and they'll go around the very top of the edge of the lead. And, you know, that's how they tack it in. This is a completely filled joint with 60-40 solder. And as you can see, when I was going around, I always try to keep my flame toward the brass flange. You don't want to have your flame facing in toward the lead because, needless to say, you'll burn a hole in the lead. And you saw me using the candle, and that candle was to cool it down when I felt it was getting a little too hot. And then I finally used my wiping cloth. But 2 passes. Initially, I melted in between the void. You saw me dripping it in the joint to get it down there. Then I'll fold that wiping cloth in half and go around with the torch and kind of force it into the void there. And then I make my second pass with a second set of drizzles, if you will. And then once I get that up to the proper level, I will heat it up. And then you'll see with my wiping cloth, you saw how I folded it, and I just basically wiped it. And that's it, guys. Again, I don't think it's a DIY project, but you know, if you feel so inclined, be my guest. I hope you enjoyed this, and so now you know how I do these particular tasks when I run across the right situation. So there you go, guys. What do you think? I know a lot of you are probably saying that's overkill, that's crazy, why waste the money on the bar solder? But guys, this is the way I was taught. I've been doing this all my life. It's just, to me, a bulletproof method. You know, 50% of the times I'm able to secure the flange down to the floor. The other 50% of the time, there is no subfloor. It's very hard for me to get that flange set. And by using that technique that I use in filling up that complete void, that flange is not going anywhere. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. But the most important thing you can do is give me a thumbs up, because if you don't like these videos, honestly, YouTube just puts them to the side and doesn't show them to anybody. I'm going to leave a couple of videos coming up here that are going to show up, and possibly maybe you might like them as well. Maybe I'll leave those videos I did in the past about, you know, how I go about doing something like this. And listen, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Stay well, and as always, you know what's coming. Happy plumbing.